Okay, I have an absolutely wild video to share about the Indian caste system and how it affects real people in Canada today. We're going to dive into a few things, but let's just watch this.
Now, you may have heard of something called the caste system in India, but did you know it happens here in Canada as well? It's a lottery by birth. And in some Indian homes, it dictates who you can date, who you can marry, the lowest ranking being a quote, untouchable, which is a title our next guest was born into and was able to break free from. So please welcome Mira Estrada, who's joining us now. Thank you so much, Mira. It is so good to have you. Thank you. Could you help us understand the caste system, how it works, what it means, and what are the different sort of class systems that exist within the caste system?
For sure. So it's a 3,000-year-old hierarchical system in India. And if you think about it as a pyramid, so at the top of the pyramid, you have the Brahmins, or who are the teachers, the priests. Then you have the warriors. And then you have the merchants and the business people. And then you have the laborers. And then there is a group that is seen so beneath them that they're outside of that system. They're subcastes. And those are the untouchables, or Dalits, which means the broken ones. And so they do the menial jobs of cleaning sewers, and they're forced into these jobs. And like,
Let's just think about this for a second. So they have a class system. I think no one's surprised by that, but I didn't realize before until a while ago that they even have something below the normal class system. So you're like someone that cleans the sewers, cleans the poop, just does the most menial tasks, and isn't even really treated like a person. But let's just keep watching.
it is an unescapable. That is who you are by birth, and you cannot escape that.
You are a champion of this cause. You have been working tirelessly to try and get rid of this hierarchy or have people look past it. Why is this so important to you, Mira?
Well, first and foremost, it's personal because I am born untouchable. And when I look at my family history, recent history, my grandfather in India, he actually learned to read and write sitting outside of school because he was not allowed in a school building. If an upper caste person walks by, he had to put his head in the dirt because even the shadow is seen as impure.
Just think about that for a second. So even her grandfather couldn't even go to school, and then when an upper caste person walked by, he had to put his head in the dirt. Like this happened fairly recently, and it's still happening today in India.
My father's era was the era of segregation. So he could go to school. He sat at the back of the classroom. He was not called by his name. He was called BC, meaning backward class. He couldn't drink from the water pot. Upper caste boys would pour the water into his mouth, everything to demean and dehumanize a person. I've never lived a day in my life in India, and caste has been with me my entire life in terms of people asking what caste I am, especially in my 20s, my feeling of self-worth, self-esteem was so low because I didn't tell anybody. I was just passed.
So, I mean, she's obviously Canadian. She grew up here. She's never lived in India, and she still can't even escape the caste system, even being an Indian Canadian and a Canadian, basically. And it's still, she can't get it out of it.
Not even my closest friends. I did not tell a soul what caste I was born into.
That is a hard way to live. And then to realize that people are asking you about caste here in Canada, that is something I did not know. Mm-hmm. So you didn't speak of your caste to anyone around you. What was the turning point? When did you start talking about this with people who are close to you?
So it was a very difficult turning point. Not until I was 40 years old did I talk about it. And I was at one of my close friends, again, growing up here, 20-year friendship. I had just had my second child, my daughter. We were on a play date. My mom even had come with me. And I was a journalist, and I hadn't told anybody about caste, but from a journalistic perspective, I had read that lower caste surrogates are paid less than higher caste surrogates. And my friend had just come from India at one of those fertility clinics. And so I asked her, I said, is that true? And she looked at me so nonchalantly, and she said, yeah, of course. I would never get a lower caste surrogate. I wouldn't want my kid to be stupid.
So this is even this person's friend in Canada talking about getting a surrogate that gets paid less from different castes because they wouldn't want their kid to be stupid. So she's experiencing like hate and like discrimination within, Indian groups within Canada. I mean, she never told anybody her caste, but that would be so hard to do. I have friends, and they got out of the caste system as well, but it was very difficult because their whole family, even though they are educated, they have a master's degree, and even almost the same caste system, it was very difficult to marry someone from a different caste, and they had to beg and fight. And a lot of people experience that. And if you marry someone from a different caste, there's a decent chance, honestly, even now, that your parents basically will never speak to you again. Like, it sounds crazy, but even now it's true.
And she said it, and my heart stopped. And I looked from the corner of my eye. I could see my daughter, my baby daughter, and her daughter playing together. I saw my mom, and I said, I am not going to have my child go through this. And my mom and I, when we got in the car, I burst into tears. I said, Mom, I need to speak up. And it was the first time I said, yes, you need to speak up, because she came from a place of fear as well, which I understand, but she realized, she said, no, you say whatever, you tell the world. And I did.
And you are, you're doing this while your parents watch you take these really courageous and brave steps, because this is a really big deal. I want to talk about caste in the Canadian context. So it lives here, it moves here. How does it work within our Canadian system? Because I think we're used to class, but we're learning about caste.
And so if you think about it, as more and more people immigrate, yes, we bring our beautiful cultures and traditions. We celebrate Diwali, Holi, but we also bring those uglier sides. And so it has become a big problem here, especially in university settings. In schools, I was asked to speak at a school of 12, 13-year-olds because there is caste-based bullying. And when I asked the class, I said, does anyone know what caste is? 95% of them raised their hands. These are 12-year-olds. And so it's starting very young. But there is progress being made. The States is passing laws in Seattle, the whole state of California. The TDSB, which is Ontario's biggest school system, finally passed a motion to have caste in the curriculum and as a protected category. It's now gone up to the Ontario Human Rights Commission. So things are starting to change. And I think just naming it gives it legitimacy.
So TDSB is Toronto District School Board for anyone who lives outside.
I agree. I think it's very important just for people, including white Canadians, to understand that there is a caste system. So a lot of Indians are being discriminated against their own people within Canada. You don't realize what a big deal this is, because we've never experienced this type of, segregation before, and like prejudice. Like, yeah, we made jokes maybe about someone from Newfoundland about being a slow talker or something, but it was nothing like this. Like, we could still marry someone from there. We didn't have any like class system where it was so different. Yeah, there might have been some opinions with certain groups within a culture, but it was nothing like a caste system. And I originally thought it was just for getting married, and like that's how you do arranged marriages, more with a certain type. But I didn't realize it was like, this is your station in life. You can't even associate with people, and you might be treated like dirt if you're not even from the caste system. I know a lot of Indians here, they don't even want to live in Brampton because there's so many Indians there. I'm like, why don't you live there? They're like, no, I'm happy to live somewhere with not so many Indians. And it's funny because like, this is obviously what they're thinking about. No one's asking them, what's your caste? I would never ask them that. And the people that I know here are very open to talk about it. And they just like, no, sorry, there's way too many Indians in there. I moved to Canada because I wanted to get out of that. And this is what they're talking about. And I think it should be part of history and like Canadian, part of the school system. You should learn about all different cultures since we have so many here. And then maybe we'll start to understand and accept more as well. Okay, that was a good clip. This is another video about the caste system specifically, and it has some really good visuals to talk about the lowest tier called the untouchables. And it's really wild to think about where it came from, how long ago it came from, and what is it, and how is it affecting Canadians today in Canada that are Indian. So let's just watch this.
Caste system in India was basically just to allot work and have an efficient society. However, later on it was used as a means to discriminate, and that has carried on into the present day. Some people say the Dalits were made because of hygienic reasons so that they do not end up transferring any of these diseases from maybe handling dead animals and like from cleaning. That's what they're called, untouchable. However, another reason they said for the division is because India was colonized by the Aryans in the beginning. They wanted to stay in power, so they decided to discriminate based on the skin tone, and Dravidians, who were originally the people occupying India, they're darker than Aryans. Eventually, the darkest skin color ended up being the most discriminated against. Somehow that also ended up in them being associated with the untouchables and them doing the lower tasks so that they do not move higher in ranks. Caste system in India was
Okay, so you think about the different ranks. So that basically it was the skin color too. So obviously if you were from a lower caste, you probably, put white makeup and different things on so you didn't seem like you were darker or an untouchable. And in the video we saw before, the person is an Indian Canadian, but she was from the untouchable part. And like that's crazy what she had to experience even in Canada growing up, even though, she wasn't Indian at all. But she still lived with a bunch of Indians, and eventually she started speaking up and had to tell the world her story because she thought about her daughter, and she didn't want to live in a country anymore that was, she had to hide from what caste she was. And I think that's a great story, and I hope you liked and subscribed to this channel, and I will see you on the next one.